They used to look at us like we were animals, not even worth cataloging properly. To them, Earth was a backwater planet filled with primitive bipeds still fighting over invisible lines drawn in dirt. We hadn't even colonized our moon properly, and most of our technology looked like a child's toy in comparison to theirs. The Galari Union didn't see us as a threat. They didn't even see us as potential allies. Just noise, static in the universe. That all changed the day the war spilled onto our soil. The skies opened with no warning. The first few ships entered orbit, cloaked in silence. Then came the flashes, bursts of light that wiped entire cities off the map in seconds. At first, we thought it was an alien invasion. We were half right. What really landed on Earth was a war older than our written history. The Galari were fighting the Krovax horde, a race of brutal, nomadic conquerors that believed in one law: the strong take everything. Earth was caught in the middle. They tried to avoid us at first. Both sides. Earth had no tactical value, no resources worth fighting over. But something went wrong. A Krovax warship was damaged mid-battle and crash-landed near Nevada. The Galari followed, and suddenly both factions were stomping across our continents like they owned the place. That was when humanity stopped being invisible. They killed millions. Our weapons were useless. Our governments collapsed within weeks. What little resistance remained fought with rifles, bombs, and sheer madness. That's when something happened. Something neither the Krovax nor the Galari expected. Humanity didn't roll over. We didn't beg. We got mad. We learned. Fast. The first sign was in South America. A rebel cell took down a Krovax walker using nothing but an old oil tanker rigged with explosives. It shouldn't have worked. But it did. Then a team of engineers from what remained of NASA hacked into a damaged Galari drone and started reverse engineering it. Within months, our tech jumped 100 years forward. We weren't just adapting. We were evolving. That's when they started to notice. The Galari underestimated our adaptability. The Krovax underestimated our brutality. Earth became a testing ground, not just for alien weapons, but for what humanity could become when pushed to the edge. We scavenged tech like scavengers picking bones. We didn't understand half of it, but that didn't stop us from using it. In the ruins of Berlin, a group of teenagers built a railgun using parts from a crashed Galari fighter. They called it the Earth Spike. It pierced Krovax armor like it was paper. Word spread. All across the globe, pockets of resistance rose, small at first, scattered. But they had one thing in common: the fire to fight back. By the end of the first year, Earth had gone from battlefield to proving ground. We weren't unified, not really. But we were angry, desperate, and in that desperation something ancient awoke in us, something even we didn't understand. The will to survive, no matter the cost. The fury of a species that had spent its whole history fighting each other, nature, and now the stars. I was in Chicago when it all truly began, a burned-out city that still smelled like ash and blood. I had lost everything. My brother, my home, even my name. But when I saw a Galari scout drone scanning the rubble, I didn't run. I picked up the pipe lying beside me and smashed it into the thing's eye again and again until it sparked and died. I didn't know it then, but that moment marked the beginning of something bigger. Because that drone had been broadcasting. And someone, somewhere, watched a primitive human destroy advanced alien tech with nothing but rage and steel. And for the first time, they were afraid of us. After I smashed that drone, I sat there breathing heavy, knuckles bleeding, pipe trembling in my hand. It felt like a dream, half nightmare, half revelation. That hum of alien tech dying under the weight of raw human anger had a strange kind of music to it, a terrible, brutal music. I didn't know if I'd just doomed myself. Maybe I triggered an alarm. Maybe they'd send 10 more, but deep inside, something had shifted. I wasn't afraid anymore. I dragged the drone back to the underground shelter. We were only 20 people back then, ex-soldiers, a few medics, and a handful of survivors who barely knew how to hold a gun. They looked at the mangled wreck like it was a holy artifact. Sarah, our best engineer, and by best, I mean she used to work at a garage before everything fell apart, took one look at the scorched circuits and muttered, "We can use this." And we did. Over the next week, we tore it apart. The body casing went into armor plating. The optics became our early warning system. The power core, small and cracked, was stabilized and hooked to a jury-rigged turret guarding the shelter's entrance. That drone became more than just salvage. It became a symbol. The message was clear. We could kill them. Word got out. That's the thing about humans. We gossip, even in the apocalypse. Especially in the apocalypse. Survivors from neighboring zones came through. They brought stories. One guy from Detroit claimed he saw a man drop a Galari flyer using nothing but a sniper rifle and pure luck. A group from Wisconsin had captured a Krovac scout alive and were dissecting it like a biology project from hell. A woman from Toronto arrived carrying a plasma rifle she'd looted off a dead alien and modified with duct tape and chewing gum. We were no longer survivors. We were learning, faster than we ever had. A month later, the first coordinated human offensive was launched. We called ourselves the Cracked Earth. Fitting, since everything was broken. Our cities, our families, our hope. But beneath that cracked surface, something powerful was rising. A fury. A hunger. We didn't care about peace treaties or diplomacy. That time had passed. We were fighting for the right to exist. The Cracked Earth didn't have tanks or fleets or dropships. What we had were pickups armored with scrap metal, weapons stolen from dead enemies, and a kind of wild desperation that scared even us. Our first mission? Retake a fuel depot the Galari were using as a refueling outpost just outside what used to be Cincinnati. I was part of that mission. It wasn't heroic. It wasn't clean. It was a massacre. We came in during a thunderstorm, using the cover to mask our heat signatures. There were only 4 Galari soldiers stationed at the depot. 4. That's how little they thought of us. They didn't even bother to set up a full perimeter. We had 13 fighters. Half of us had never seen real combat before. We took 2 losses just getting through the perimeter. But when we broke through, when we saw the shimmering blue of their energy cores humming beside our own rusted fuel tanks, we knew what we had to do. I remember the first alien I killed face to face. He wasn't monstrous, not the way they look in vids. He looked almost serene, tall and graceful, with a smooth face and silver eyes that barely blinked. He looked surprised when I shot him, like he couldn't believe a primitive like me had gotten this close. I emptied the clip into his chest. We burned that depot to the ground after stripping everything we could carry. Plasma cells, magnetic accelerators, even some of their strange nanowire netting, which we later figured out could short-circuit their scanners. We left nothing behind. And we didn't run. That was the key difference. Before, humans hid, survived. But now we were standing, fighting. The Galari called it a minor disruption. The Krovacs called it stupidity. But both were wrong. Because the thing about humans is we don't stop. Ever. Not when our backs are to the wall. Not when we're cornered. Not even when we're dying. Especially not when we're dying. Soon, more cells popped up. Seattle, Boston, Caracas, Cairo. We weren't a unified front, not yet. But we were screaming with the same voice. You can't kill us all. The Galari started shifting tactics. They weren't built for occupation, not really. They were thinkers, scientists, idealists turned soldiers by necessity. They tried to negotiate with some human groups, offering tech, peace, even limited protection. A lot of desperate people took the bait. Some of them vanished. Some turned on us. We called them shades, humans who served alien masters. Betrayal in a war like this cuts deeper than any laser rifle. My best friend, Malik, joined them. Said he was tired of fighting, tired of watching people die. The Galari gave him food, medicine, even clean water. Last I saw him, he was helping them secure a village. When we launched an ambush, he tried to talk us down. He didn't make it. I still see his face in my dreams. But betrayal only fed the fire. The Galari learned quickly. Divide and conquer wouldn't work on us. We'd been divided for centuries and still managed to survive. Now that we had a common enemy, we were becoming something terrifying. Unified. The Krovaks, on the other hand, didn't bother with subtlety. They brought war like a plague. Cities that had survived for centuries were flattened in hours. They hunted survivors for sport. They broadcast executions. They called it culling. They thought fear would break us. But all it did was show us the truth. We weren't fighting for territory or resources. We were fighting for our soul. I'll never forget the siege of Anchorage. It lasted 7 days. The Krovaks landed with full ground forces, battle mechs, carriers, war beasts with metal-spined bodies and flesh-melting venom. We had maybe 300 fighters, plus civilians with whatever weapons they could scrape together. We should have been wiped out in minutes. Instead, we held. We used the weather, freezing winds and blizzards that slowed their machines. We used our knowledge of the terrain, mountain passes, abandoned subway tunnels, the rusted remains of old military outposts. We rigged traps. We fought like animals. No, like humans. Resourceful, ruthless, wild. By day 5, the Krovaks were calling for reinforcements. By day 7, they were retreating. We lost 2/3 of our people. But the message was clear. We weren't prey anymore. We were predators in training. The turning point came a few weeks later, when we did something that made even the Galari panic. We hijacked a Galari frigate. That's right. A human crew of 20, led by a former janitor named Reyes and a 17-year-old hacker named Min, boarded a downed ship and took control. It shouldn't have worked, but somehow it did. Reyes sent out the message himself. "This is Earth. We're done kneeling. Come and get us." The message went viral across the surviving human networks. People cried when they heard it. People screamed. But most of all, people believed. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were fighting back. And the galaxy had just started to notice. The Galari Council, previously content to let the war stay off their homeworlds, now saw Earth as a critical threat. Not because of our tech, but because of our tenacity. The Krovaks, humiliated by repeated losses against what they saw as apes with guns, declared Earth a death world in development. They wanted us glassed, erased. But it was too late. The virus of resistance had spread, not just across Earth, but beyond, across colonies once controlled by the Galari, across Krovaks-occupied zones where slaves watched human footage and whispered, "If they can fight, maybe we can too." We were no longer just fighting for Earth. We were fighting to show the galaxy something it had forgotten, that when humans are pushed into a corner, we don't just claw our way out, we burn the walls down, and in those flames we become something more. Not just survivors, not even warriors. We become monsters. Monsters that bleed, monsters that cry, monsters that never stop. And now, they're starting to realize, they made us this way. We didn't choose this war, but by the 3rd year, it didn't matter. Earth had changed, scarred, twisted into something unfamiliar but stronger. Cities were no longer population centers. They were fortresses carved from rubble and anger. Skyscrapers became sniper towers. Schools were repurposed into command centers. Shopping malls turned into underground bunkers, where engineers taught children how to fire alien rifles before they could even read. No one was innocent anymore. There was no time for it. The Galari frigate we captured became our first warship. We renamed it the Fang. That name meant something to us. We were the prey who had grown teeth. Min, the hacker who helped take it, became something of a legend. She was no soldier, just a girl with a stolen datapad and a mind sharp enough to rewire Galari firewalls mid-flight. Her message across rebel frequencies became gospel. Don't wait to be saved. Steal the ship. Light the fire. Let them burn. We started reverse engineering everything. Galari tech, Krovax armor, anything we could rip from their corpses or pull out of the dirt. Our weapons began to evolve, hybridizing alien power with human creativity. They had clean energy cores and biometric locks. We had chainsaws strapped to plasma rifles, duct-taped grenades stuffed with nanite powder, and targeting systems that worked off nothing but sound and luck. And somehow, it worked. That's the thing they couldn't understand about us. The Galari planned everything. Clean, perfect execution. The Krovax? Brutal. Direct. But humans? We were chaos wrapped in flesh. Improvisation made manifest. A soldier would throw a jammed rifle like a spear, pick up a Krovax limb and use it as a bludgeon, scream a lullaby while stabbing a war beast in the throat. No logic, no elegance, just fire. I saw it firsthand in the ruins of Johannesburg. The Krovax had dropped a biovirus there weeks earlier, turning the air thick and red. The Galari abandoned the zone. They said it was lost. But we didn't leave. The ones who stayed wore oxygen rigs cobbled from scrap and cleaned air with charcoal and instinct. I was embedded with a unit called Ash Rats. They lived like ghosts, hollowed eyes, skin stained black with soot. They ambushed a Krovax convoy right in the heart of the contamination zone. No one expected it. They didn't use guns. They used silence. The Krovax patrols vanished one by one. No shots fired. Just quiet disappearances into the fog. One soldier returned, missing his arms. Another was found tied to a collapsed beam with his own intestines. It wasn't strategy. It was terror. A kind of warfare that clawed its way from the primal parts of our past. When the Krovax command finally pulled out of Johannesburg, they didn't even send a cleanup crew. They called the city cursed. Let that sink in. The Krovax, a race that ate planets for sport, ran from human fear. That's when we knew. They weren't invincible. Not to us. Not to what we were becoming. Not everyone liked what we were turning into, though. Some thought we were losing our humanity. Father Ignatius, a priest turned medic in what used to be Vatican City, said, "To fight monsters, we've become demons. What do we have left when this ends?" I didn't have an answer. Maybe we were becoming monsters, but monsters survive. And survival was the only gospel I could follow. Still, even monsters need leaders. The day I met Commander Rayla, I was half dead, dragging a cracked plasma cannon across what used to be southern France. Her unit had intercepted me after I triggered a minesweeper trap left by Galari scouts. My leg was broken in 3 places, ribs shattered, blood caking my eyes. I thought they'd shoot me, maybe strip me for gear. But instead she pulled me into her dropship, barked orders in a voice that could shatter stone, and said, "We don't leave fire behind." That was her motto. Rayla was unlike anyone I'd seen. Born in a refugee camp in Kazakhstan, she grew up eating expired rations and watching the stars burn. Her parents were crushed under the remains of a Galari skimmer when she was 12. By 15, she was leading raids. By 21, she was organizing city-wide defenses using nothing but chalk maps and stubbornness. She unified the first real resistance coalition, the Red Line Pact. It was a network of free cities, nomadic units, and salvager guilds spread across 5 continents. For the first time, we had something close to strategy. Not just wild retaliation, not just rage. Purpose. The Pact's first major strike was the reclamation of the Andean Array, an ancient Galari signal tower embedded into the mountains, capable of jamming interstellar comms. It was the reason Earth had been isolated for so long. We took it back. The fight lasted 11 days. We lost 70% of our force. But when we rewired that tower and sent out our first real human broadcast across the stars, the message was simple. We are here. We are not yours. Come again, and you'll burn. Galari Prime tried to intercept the signal. They failed. The Krovax Empire tried to retaliate. They failed harder. See, the more they attacked, the more they taught us. They taught us how to rip their ships from the sky with scrap cannons, how to turn weather satellites into orbital EMP bombs, how to use psychological warfare by broadcasting their own deaths back to them in infinite loops. But most importantly, they taught us unity through shared suffering. Humanity had been fractured before. War, race, borders, ideologies. But nothing unites like extinction. And now we were united by one word: revenge. Still, this war wasn't just about killing. It was about remembering who we were before. One night, after a successful raid on a Krovax drop zone in Morocco, we sat around a fire, a luxury in those days. An old woman sang songs from before the war. A child drew on a broken gallery drone with chalk, pretending it was a dog. Someone played an old guitar with a bent neck. Rayla looked at the stars and whispered, "We were never meant to stay here." I didn't understand then, but I do now. This war, as awful as it was, wasn't the end of humanity. It was the beginning of something bigger. Because here's the thing, they called Earth a battleground. They thought they were invading us. But what they didn't realize was we were hatching. Earth wasn't a planet anymore. It was a forge, and the fire was just getting started. The first time we took the fight into orbit, we weren't ready. We thought we were. We'd hijacked enough Galari tech to piece together a crude fleet, 3 corvettes, 1 semi-operational destroyer, and a half-functional orbital lift we called the Chain. It wasn't much, not compared to the fleets hovering over Earth like gods watching ants. But to us, it was sacred. A symbol that we were done being bound to the ground. We launched during a meteor shower, hoping the debris would shield our ascent. It didn't. They were waiting. Krovax scout ships punched through our formation like knives through butter. Our destroyer was vaporized before we even reached low orbit. 38 crew. Gone in a blink. I was aboard the Chain, screaming into comms that were too garbled to make sense, watching pieces of humanity's first orbital hope rain down like fireflies through the clouds. We lost 2 corvettes, but the last one, Crucible, made it through. Barely. That ship became a ghost, vanished for months. Some said it was destroyed, others said it had been boarded and taken. But when it returned, it wasn't the same vessel. Its hull was blackened with alien alloys, its engines modified with stolen tech we didn't even understand. And its captain, Lieutenant Azim Rafik, came back different. They said he stared into a Krovax hive mind node and laughed. Whatever happened out there, Crucible returned with more than tech. It brought tactics, patterns in how the Krovax coordinated, where their supply chains broke, which orbital stations were vulnerable. Azim gave us maps, layouts, internal schematics downloaded directly from the Krovax neural grid. That's when we realized our war wasn't planetary anymore. We were becoming something else, and the Krovax knew it. Their retaliation came swift. In less than 72 hours, they rained hell on 10 of our most secure bunkers. The Geneva Cache, the Vladivostok Vault, the Southern Cross Silo, obliterated with surgical precision. They weren't just attacking resources, they were targeting hope. Rayla was in Vladivostok when it hit. We didn't find her body. Only her badge, scorched but intact, buried under 20 feet of steel. I didn't cry, not then. I couldn't. There was no time for grief, only fury. I took command of her division, cracked Earth Northern, not because I was the best, I wasn't, but because everyone else was dead, and in war, sometimes that's all it takes. I made a vow that night, over her ashes, over the empty chair she once occupied in the comms room. We will make them choke on every life they've stolen. We started hitting harder. We targeted Krovax orbital foundries. We weaponized Earth's magnetic storms, turning their satellites into shrapnel. We built our first echo beacons, devices that scrambled Galari targeting systems and fed them false visuals of their own ships attacking each other. By the time the third orbital campaign began, we had 5 ships in low orbit. Not much, but enough. Enough to hurt. We didn't aim to win battles anymore. We aimed to scar, to make them remember our names. And it worked. One Galari official was recorded during a transmission screaming, "They are unclean, illogical. They kill without purpose, even when they cannot win." He didn't get it. That was the purpose. We weren't fighting to survive anymore. We were fighting to make them bleed, even if it meant dying in the process. But not everyone could keep up. The cost was high, too high for some. Mental breakdowns became common. PTSD wasn't a condition anymore. It was standard issue. Whole units collapsed from stress before even reaching the battlefield. Suicide raids became a tactic, not out of strategy, but because some fighters couldn't bear to keep going. I lost good people. Yannick, who used to write poetry in his field reports, blown apart by his own grenade when a Galari jammer corrupted our signal. Lena, who refused to come out of her armor for 6 straight days until her heart gave out. Mason, who walked into a Krovax nest with a smile on his face and 2 charges strapped to his chest. They weren't heroes. They were human. And we had forgotten what peace even looked like. Still, the tide was shifting. For the first time in years, they were afraid of us. Reports from deep space colonies started trickling in. Other species, oppressed under the weight of the Galari and Krovax, began fighting back. Not with fleets, not with armies, but with the same rage we had taught them. Explosions in research facilities, ambushes on supply ships, broadcasts of rebellion echoing across the void. We'd become a virus, a human-shaped plague infecting the galaxy with the idea that defeat wasn't guaranteed. And they hated us for it. The Galari Council passed something they called the Containment Edict, a diplomatic name for what amounted to genocide. Their plan was to seal Earth behind an energy net, a planetary cage powered by quantum anchors buried in the Moon, Mars, and several orbiting satellites. They didn't want to destroy us. They wanted to isolate us, forever. So we destroyed their anchors. One by one we hit them. Suicide squads, drone strikes, repurposed mining vessels turned into kinetic weapons. We took losses. Entire crews lost to vacuum, radiation, counterattack. But we took them all down. And when the net collapsed, Earth screamed back, "We are not prisoners. We are not pets. We are the storm you created." It was around this time that something unexpected happened. The Veari, a species the Galari had long called non-combative, peaceful, artistic, harmless. They made music instead of war, created sculptures out of light, and lived in floating cities that hadn't seen a weapon in centuries, until they watched Earth fight, until they saw our fires. They sent us a gift, a ship. Not large, not powerful, but equipped with phase tech we'd never seen. A living ship, its surface rippling like water, its systems responding to emotion, not command. They called it Shithari, which roughly translated to the last chord before war. With it came a message. You reminded us that peace without choice is slavery. You reminded us how to bleed. We integrated their tech. Slowly, carefully, but the fact was clear. Humanity wasn't alone anymore, and the war was no longer just Earth's burden. It had become something else. A spark in the dark, a rallying cry. Across the stars, species that had long accepted their chains were rising. Not in armies, but in anger, in memory, in fire. And at the center of it stood us. Broken, bleeding, unstoppable. They called us primitive. They called us beasts, but now they called us something else. Catalyst. The sky was no longer the limit. By the start of year 4, humans were no longer earthbound. We had finally crawled out of the mud, and we brought the dirt with us. We weren't graceful like the Galari. We weren't relentless like the Krovaks. But we were everywhere, spread out like infection across the stars, digging into every crevice we could find. They tried to erase us, and all they did was help us multiply. Every city they glassed gave birth to 10 more fighters. Every soldier they killed inspired 100 more. We had no homeworld anymore. Earth was still there, scarred and burning, but it wasn't our limit. It was our origin story. And now we were writing a new chapter, one system at a time. We called it the Graveborn Offensive. Why? Because every soldier who joined swore an oath. I was born of death, and I will bring it with me. I led one of the first waves into the Veridan Belt, a Galari trade sector that had never known violence. It was all white towers and floating gardens, an artificial Eden built on the bones of 10 exploited systems. They called it a cultural sanctuary, a holy place. We turned it into a battlefield, not because we hated their art, not because we wanted revenge for every destroyed city, every burned child, every mutilated memory. We did it because the Galari still refused to believe we had the right to exist as anything more than a mistake. When our dropships fell like meteors onto Veridan, they didn't even raise shields. They thought it was a malfunction. Until we came screaming through the glass. They didn't understand what they were seeing. Human Marines in Krovak's armor, dual-wielding hacked Galari rifles, faces painted with ashes and blood. They had never fought anything like us. Because even now, they didn't realize we weren't fighting for territory. We were fighting to make them remember. By the end of that campaign, Veridan's crystal temples were rubble, and their archives, millennia of cultural memory, had been hacked and uploaded into human servers. We took their history. We took their pride. We left their sky in flames. And we didn't apologize. Some called it a war crime. Maybe it was. But then I remembered the nursery in Brazil that got vaporized by a Krovak skiff. The 2 kids who melted into bone and dust before they even learned to read. And I stopped caring about their temples. The Crucible, now captained by Azim and modified beyond recognition, became our flagship. We didn't even hide it anymore. We let it prowl enemy systems openly, daring them to come for it. It became more than a ship. It became a myth. A black, fanged symbol of what humans had become. Some alien species began calling it the Dead Sun, because wherever it went, the light went out. But we weren't monsters without cause. Not all aliens were the enemy. In the shadows of this galactic war, some saw us for what we really were. Not conquerors, not destroyers, but warnings. The Veyari had already allied with us, feeding us tech and knowledge from a time before the Galari even learned to fly. But they weren't the only ones. The Kavari, a subterranean race enslaved by the Krovaks for generations, reached out after hearing our transmissions. They had no ships, no armies, but they had memory. They gave us blueprints to Krovak's energy relays, slave trade routes, genetic weaknesses in their war beasts that no one else knew. In return, we gave them weapons. We gave them a voice. And when they rebelled, it wasn't quiet. It was glorious. You've never seen true beauty until you've watched a slave world turn on its masters. Until you've watched chainbreakers ride their captors' own war machines into battle, singing in languages forbidden for centuries. Until you've seen a planet breathe free for the first time in 1,000 years, and know you had something to do with that. That was our legacy now, not just blood. Hope. But hope came with its own price. We were spreading too fast, and not everyone agreed with the way we were doing it. Factions started to form. Not Galari or Krovax, human. There were those who believed we had to end the war now. That peace could be negotiated. That if we stopped burning everything in our path, maybe the galaxy would accept us as equals. We called them the Fold. Not out of mockery, but because they wanted us to fold back into diplomacy, into rules, into being civilized again. Then there were those like me. We called ourselves the Red Grief. Not a faction, really, more of a belief. That this war wasn't just survival, it was retribution. That we didn't need the galaxy's approval. We needed its fear. And so civil conflict within our own resistance began to brew. It didn't start with bullets. It started with whispers, sabotaged missions, misinformation, then assassinations. Min, the girl who helped hijack the Fang, was found strangled in her sleep. A note pinned to her chest. Peace requires sacrifice. They blamed the Fold. The Fold denied it. But the damage was done. Paranoia spread like wildfire. Trust began to crack. I sat across from Azim in Crucible's war room, staring at a digital map littered with battlefields, safe havens, and growing red marks where our own were turning on each other. We're becoming what we swore to destroy, I said quietly. He didn't respond right away. Just sipped black coffee brewed with recycled water and said, "Or maybe this is what we always were." That hit me harder than any bullet ever could. I walked out without another word. That night, I stood in Crucible's observation deck and watched Earth from orbit. It looked so small, like a burnt marble floating in ink. And I realized something horrible. We were never going back. Even if we won, even if we burned every Krovax ship and shattered every Galari station, we weren't Earthlings anymore. We were something new, not born of a planet, born of war, born of loss, born of grief. And grief doesn't forget. It doesn't forgive. It only moves forward, one body at a time. We lost the moon on a Thursday. We had held it for 8 months. A miracle, considering we had no formal navy, no real fleet. Just scavenged Krovax dropships and reanimated Galari cruisers stitched together with grit and insanity. Lunar Base Omega had become our staging ground for off-world raids, our symbol of permanence. A beacon, however cracked and flickering. And then the Krovax came. Not with their usual battalions. This time they sent a color-class dreadnought, the kind of ship that made suns shiver, one of only 5 known to exist. A planet cracker, a floating genocide. They didn't glass the moon. They wanted to send a message. We intercepted a Krovax comms burst mid-battle. One word translated, looping endlessly. Kneel. But humanity doesn't kneel, not anymore. The last recorded message from Lunar Base Omega was a voice transmission. A young woman. Calm. Her name was Tessa. She whispered into the mic. "If you find this, don't waste time mourning. Take it back, or burn everything trying." Then static. Then silence. Then nothing. We didn't hold a funeral. We built a plan. It took 2 weeks. We called it Operation Widowmaker. The name wasn't poetic. It was prophetic. We knew it would fail. That wasn't the point. The point was pain. The point was fear. If they wanted to take the moon, they'd pay for every crater, every grain of dust in blood. I volunteered. So did 15,000 others. We didn't choose the best. We chose the angriest. The assault wasn't subtle. We crashed a stolen Galari orbital refinery into the moon's surface to mask our entry. Radiation fried half our comms, and kinetic impact killed over 200 of our own. No one flinched. No one turned back. We moved like ghosts through the tunnels the Krovacs now used as their command posts. They hadn't even cleared the human corpses. Some of our dead were still floating, faces frozen in agony and oxygen-starved smiles. We stepped past them like saints walking among fallen martyrs. They weren't just memories. They were motivation. It took us 3 days to reach the dreadnought docked on the far side. We didn't try to steal it. We knew we couldn't fly that thing. Hell, we barely understood it. But we could break it. We overloaded its core. A suicide engineer team stayed behind to make sure the fail-safes didn't kick in. They carved their names into the blast doors before they died. When that dreadnought exploded, it was visible from Earth. Some said it looked like a sunrise. Others said it looked like vengeance. The moon's fragments rained down across Earth's atmosphere for hours. Some burned up. Some made it to the surface. Chunks of alien alloy, radioactive glass, and twisted steel. People gathered them, kept them like holy relics. We hadn't won the moon back, but we made sure no one else could have it. And that was enough. But war has a strange way of revealing truths no one wants to face. After Widowmaker, things shifted again. Inside us. We started doing things we once would have condemned. We turned captured Galari medics into interrogation drones. We programmed them to scream during memory extraction, not because it helped, because it made our people feel better. We deployed atmospheric disruptors over a civilian Galari outpost, said it was a weapons depot. It wasn't. But we needed a demonstration, something to scare the colonies into cutting off supply lines. And then there was the Brood Nursery. It sat in orbit over a gas giant, wrapped in solar sails and guarded by an artificial ring of heat signatures designed to mimic life. It was a decoy, they said. A shipyard, maybe. We boarded it with a full strike team. It wasn't a shipyard. It was where Krovac's young were bred. We stood in a chamber of pale sacks, thousands of them, pulsing with unformed life. No armor, no teeth, no hate, just silence. One soldier vomited. Another whispered, "We can't." But someone else, the name was never confirmed, ignited a plasma charge. The chamber turned to fire. We didn't speak of it. We couldn't. What was there to say? The war had taught us that survival meant making impossible choices. And this one had been made before anyone could blink. After that, the nightmares came harder. We didn't just see our dead anymore. We saw theirs, saw small hands reaching from flames, saw silver-eyed infants crumpling under steel boots. Some began to question. Not our cause, but ourselves. Were we still human? Did it even matter? One night, Azim summoned the command cell into Crucible's core chamber. The lights were dimmed, the room unusually quiet. He stood before us without armor, without rank, just a man, hollow-eyed and cracking. "I've seen their dreams," he said. We didn't understand. He continued, "When we hacked their neural grid during the dreadnought explosion, I saw what they see when they sleep. The Krovacs don't dream of conquest. They dream of silence, of peace, because they were taught that anything loud, anything bright, anything different must be destroyed to protect the quiet." He looked at each of us, and we are the loudest thing they've ever heard. We said nothing. There was nothing to say. He let the silence linger, then added, almost to himself, "Maybe we're not supposed to win. Maybe we're supposed to be their punishment." That line stuck with me. It still does. Because what if that's all we are now? Not a civilization, not a species, just a punishment given form. But even punishment needs purpose. And ours was about to arrive. A deep space probe, one of the first successful long-range human-class vessels, picked up something massive moving near the Scorch Nebula. A fleet. Not Galari, not Krovacs, something new. We called them the Null. No signals, no language, just silence and dissolution. Where they passed, energy died. Gravity twisted. Thought unraveled. They weren't an army. They were entropy-made flesh, and they were heading toward the galactic core, which meant for the first time ever, we weren't the biggest threat anymore. The Galari reached out first. An emissary ship warped into Earth's orbit, white flags glowing like ancient paper against the black. Their message was simple. We require cooperation. We laughed. For hours, we laughed. Then we sent our own message back. You built the fire. Now you want our water? But we weren't fools. The Null didn't care about borders, grudges, or guilt. They would erase everything, even hate, even us. So we responded. 2 words. Under one condition. They asked what it was, and our answer was unified, bitter, and final. You kneel. They said it was the most important meeting in galactic history. They called it the Accord of Ashes. But we knew what it really was, a funeral dressed up like diplomacy, a meeting of monsters pretending they hadn't already devoured half the stars. The Galari came cloaked in shimmering white robes, speaking with artificially sweet voices. The Krovaks arrived like armored statues, silent, massive, and radiating contempt. And we showed up wearing scars, no formal uniforms, no polished boots, just burnt armor, jagged tattoos, cybernetic limbs bolted on with fury and duct tape. Some of us didn't even wear helmets. We wanted them to see our faces, our bloodshot eyes, our humanity. Whatever was left of it, the Null were coming, and they weren't sending diplomats. So we sat at the table. Us, the Galari, the Krovaks, and a few others, frightened races pulled from their holes by the echoes of what we'd become. The Veari hovered beside us like pale ghosts, their eyes heavy with sadness. They had warned the galaxy about the Null centuries ago, and no one listened. Now everyone was listening. The Galari opened with pleasantries. We acknowledge past misunderstandings. Reyna, who now led Earth's unified front, cut them off with a laugh so sharp it could have split atoms. Don't dress it up. You tried to cage us. The Krovaks tried to erase us. We didn't misunderstand. We survived. The Krovaks said nothing. But one of their war priests stepped forward and placed something on the table. A bone fragment, polished and scorched. Reyna recognized it immediately. A fragment of her sister's rib, taken from the remains of Lunar Base Omega. A peace offering. She didn't touch it, didn't speak, just stared at the priest, then slowly drew her knife and carved a line into the table. That was our answer. No forgiveness, just cooperation under fire. The terms of the alliance were simple, brutal. One combined fleet, shared command structure, no hierarchy, decisions by unanimous vote, all weapons, all tech, all intelligence, shared without restriction. And Earth would have veto power on everything. The Galari hated it. The Krovaks didn't react at all. But they agreed, because the Null were coming, and nothing else mattered. Still, unity is a thin coat of paint on a rusted wall. The first joint operation was a disaster. Codenamed Iron Veil, it was supposed to be a test, a joint defense grid constructed around Kepler Station, an abandoned Galari outpost retrofitted with human artillery and Krovaks energy sinks. It lasted exactly 11 hours before the Null arrived. They didn't attack like the Krovaks. No ships, no sound, no tactics. They unmade. One moment Kepler was there, lights glowing, towers humming, and the next, it was gone. Not exploded, not vaporized, just erased, as if reality had glitched. 3,000 lives vanished. No wreckage, no heat signatures, just silence. Worse, those who saw the Null, those stationed near the anomaly fields, didn't die. Not all of them. Some came back. Wrong. Their eyes were empty, skin gray and pulsing, speech patterns shattered, They spoke in reverse, mumbled in binary, screamed at walls that weren't there. We called them the Hollowed. The Vayari believed the Null didn't kill you. They downloaded you, broke your soul down into data, information to be processed, studied, recycled. It made me wonder if every scream we ever sent into the void was just another line in their code. And yet, we fought back. The Galari deployed phase harmonics designed to distort null frequencies. The Krovax unleashed virus beasts immune to psychic decay, and humans, we did what we always do. We improvised. We took one of the Hollowed, strapped them into a cryocore, and turned their brain into a psychic cannon. When we fired it into null space, it didn't destroy anything. But the null paused. Just for a second. That pause cost us 6 more ships. But it gave us hope. We could affect them. Not kill, not stop, but touch. And that was enough. We built a new weapon. A human Krovax hybrid ship, powered by Galari dark light fusion, aimed by Vayari frequency echoes. We called it Judas, not because we were betraying anyone, because it was going to walk into null space and kill a god. I was one of 25 who volunteered to crew it. We trained inside VR war chambers, fed on nutrient packs that tasted like ash, and rehearsed death until we could smile at it. The ship itself responded to brainwaves. It was more alive than most of us, and it hummed like a hive full of dead dreams. We launched Judas into the void of Tsa, a region so contaminated by null presence that light refused to reflect off it. We didn't expect to come back. And we were right. The Judas never returned. But a signal did. A pulse, a frequency, a heartbeat. The null had felt it. For the first time they flinched, not fear, but recognition. And that's when we understood the real horror. The null weren't attacking us because they hated life. They were coming for us specifically. Not Galari, not Krovax, humans. Because we were the one species in the galaxy that didn't collapse under despair. That adapted. That turned every loss into fuel, every scream into strategy. We weren't chaos. We were resistance incarnate. And to the null, a species built on order and absolute silence, we were an anomaly. An error in the system, an infection that refused to be purged. The Galari panicked. They suggested isolating Earth again, sacrificing us to protect the larger alliance. They didn't say it outright, but we knew. Quarantine protocols. Containment. Same lies. Different day. Reyna didn't even argue. She just looked into the council camera and said, "Try it. See what happens." There was no bluff in her tone. We knew how to fight gods now. And if they wanted us to die, we'd drag the whole universe down with us. The null kept coming. So we built more Judases, more psychic torpedoes, more pain. Because pain is all we had left. But even pain was beginning to wear thin. People were cracking. Not from fear, from emptiness. There were no parades, no holidays, no laughter that didn't sound like screaming in disguise. Whole ships went silent, not because they were lost, but because the crew just stopped talking. What do you do when victory looks the same as extinction? What do you become when survival costs your soul? I sat in my quarters one night, watching Earth spin slowly in the distance, and realized I couldn't even remember what it smelled like. Dirt, rain, smoke from a real fire, not plasma discharge. My memory had been replaced by tactics, numbers, blood. A knock came at the door. It was Azim. He looked older. Even his cybernetic implants seemed tired. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then finally whispered, "They were right, you know." "Who?" "The ones who tried to warn us. The ones who said if we kept burning, we'd run out of things to burn. That revenge isn't a path. It's a loop." I didn't respond. Because I didn't care. Because maybe we had become the monsters. But at least we were ours. And even if we were damned, we'd drag the null down into hell with us. together. In the end, it wasn't fire or bullets that brought the war to its climax. It was a voice, not a human voice, not exactly. It came from deep within null space, beyond the broken stars, past the reaches where time curved like molten glass. It wasn't a scream or a demand. It wasn't even a warning. It was a question. Broadcasted across every frequency, every neural channel, every species that had ever seen war. Why do you continue? The message wasn't in a language. It arrived as feeling, a crushing sensation in the chest, like grief coated in ice. Ships across the front lines froze. Systems stuttered. Even AI cores locked into endless loops trying to decipher what came next. Only humanity responded. Reyna stepped onto the comms deck of the Crucible, eyes like rusted daggers, jaw clenched so tight her cybernetics hummed with tension. She opened a secure channel. No encryption. No tricks. Just her voice. Because you started it. It wasn't philosophical. It wasn't eloquent. But it was real, and raw, and true. And the null paused. Not stopped. Not defeated. But paused. That was all we needed. We launched what would later be called the Terminal Spiral, a multi-race, last-breath operation designed to drive the null back into the edge of the abyss they'd crawled from. The idea wasn't to destroy them. No one believed that was possible anymore. But we'd learned something. They didn't understand pain the way we did. But they understood resistance. They understood anomalies in their systems, viral loops, fractures in logic. So we gave them all three. Earth's best neurocryptologists developed a psychic virus coded from human grief. Every broken memory, every face of the dead, every child lost to Krovak's fire, every village swallowed by Galari betrayal, all of it encoded, weaponized, and loaded into one final ship, the last Judas. It wasn't crewed by soldiers, it was crewed by ghosts. Memories extracted from the hollowed, echoes of humanity at its worst and finest. A spectral army, not bound by flesh, but powered by will. I volunteered to guide it, not pilot, guide. The Judas didn't need pilots anymore. It moved on in tension, and mine was crystal clear. Let the galaxy remember what they did to us. Let the null choke on our broken hymns. Let the fire spread. The launch was quiet. No speeches, no final words. We'd run out of things to say. The null didn't respond right away. They didn't react like organisms. They reacted like laws, like gravity. But as the Judas moved deeper into the spiral, their response changed. They began to resist, not violently, desperately. Ships emerged from fold space. Not ships exactly. Massive living machines, etched with symbols older than time. They didn't fire weapons. They fired emotion. Entire fleets drowned in despair, giving up before they saw battle. Krovak's flagships imploded. Galari defense arrays went dark. But humans? We pushed through. That's what they never understood. We were forged in grief, baptized in loss. They thought our weakness was our emotions. They never realized it was our engine. The final stand happened at the edge of the null zone, a blank stretch of non-space the Veiri called the God Blind. No light, no matter, no sound, only void. Judas breached it alone. They told me it would be a one-way trip. They lied. What I saw inside cannot be explained. I saw a version of myself crying in a field that didn't exist. I saw Earth burning, not by Krovak's or Galari hands, but by ours, as if we'd always been the match waiting to strike. I saw my mother holding me during my first fever. I saw her again, moments before she was torn apart during the fall of New Chicago. And in that place, I saw what the null really were. They were peace. Terrible, complete, eternal peace. No struggle, no conflict, no fear, just silence. They weren't evil. They were the answer to every war, every scream, every goddamn wound in history, but peace without pain is extinction, and I screamed. Not in fear, in defiance. I fed every pain, every death, every betrayal into the Judas core. The memories screamed in harmony, a choir of rage and mourning. The null recoiled. I don't know if they felt fear, but they knew one thing. We would not be erased. The Judas detonated inside the core of the God-blind, not with fire, not with antimatter, with meaning. A feedback loop of grief and will so powerful it bent the rules around it. Reality fractured. The null fled, not defeated, not destroyed, but repelled. They vanished. Where? No one knows, but they haven't returned. 3 years later, the war officially ended. The Krovaks retreated to their homeworlds, signing an unspoken ceasefire. No celebrations, just silence. The Galari offered reparations, technology, territory. We didn't want it. Earth refused to join the Galactic Assembly. We didn't need them anymore. Our species had changed. Our world was still a crater-ridden, ash-choked reminder of what we endured. But we had outposts on 5 moons, 3 terraformed stations in the Orion Drift, and a human-led research facility near the God-blind. Some called it expansion, but those of us who fought knew the truth. We weren't expanding, we were escaping, because peace wasn't a reward, it was a haunting. I live now on a station called Redwake, named after the blood trail Earth left behind. I teach kids how to fly repurposed Galari crafts. Most don't know what it was like before the war. They grow up thinking space was always ours. Sometimes, when I look at their eyes, so full of light, I wonder if it's finally over. But then the wind shifts, and I remember. We weren't meant to win. We were meant to survive. And survival has a cost. The galaxy will remember the Galari for their wisdom, the Krovaks for their strength, the Vayari for their grace. But humanity? They will remember us as the fire that refused to die, the animals who turned rage into propulsion, who tore gods from the sky with rusted blades and broken faith, who loved too hard, hated too deep, and never, ever stopped screaming. They will remember us for what we are, not civilized, not noble, just human, primitive no longer, just dangerous. And somewhere in the black, I know the Null still watch. I hope they do, because if they ever return, we'll be waiting with louder voices and sharper knives.